What might have happened if the Titanic had not sunk? If the Titanic had not sunk and the Titanic's triumphant arrival in New York, with its hull bearing the honorable scars from its encounter with the iceberg, would directly fuel an architectural explosion. Invigorated by this close encounter with the power of nature, John Jacob Astor IV would direct his energy and wealth into construction. He saw the construction of ever taller and more ornate buildings as the ultimate expression of man's dominance over nature. In the 1920s, the Astor Tower or Astorian Tower could reach unprecedented heights, easily surpassing the Woolworth Building. It wouldn't just be about height, it would be about luxury and technological marvels, featuring features decades ahead of their time, all funded by a man with deep pockets and a desire to leave an indelible mark on the city he loved. The art world would feel a similar, profound impact. Peggy Guggenheim, Benjamin's niece, became one of the most important art patrons of the 20th century. But her path was shaped by family tragedy and a feeling of being an outcast. If his uncle Benjamin were alive, the family dynamics would be different. Perhaps Benjamin, with her own sophisticated tastes, would have been a great art patron herself. She may have been an early supporter of the European modernists, bringing the works of Picasso, Kandinsky, and Duchamp to America much earlier and on a larger scale. The Armory Show of 1913 shocked America with its modern art. This could have been followed by an even more ambitious Guggenheim exhibition, financed by a man with the wealth to buy entire collections and establish museums to house them. This new wave of artistic and architectural confidence would permeate American culture. The Art Deco style that defined the 1920s and 30s would perhaps have been even more extravagant. Imagine skyscrapers adorned not just with geometric ornamentation, but with grand narrative friezes depicting the Titanic's triumph, humanity's steel giant conquering the wild ice. The theme of victory over nature would become a central motif in public art and design. The already high self-confidence of the period bordered on arrogance. It would be an era of gilded towers and bold canvases, all celebrating a future that seemed limitless, a destiny manifested through American ingenuity and capital. The influence of the Strauss family was stronger, but no less important. Isidor Straus's continued leadership at Macy's, combined with her philanthropic spirit, influenced the design of public and commercial spaces. He was a man who cared about people. This could translate into more support for public parks, libraries, and community centers. While Astor built for the elite and the Guggenheim collected for the avant-garde, Strauss advocated a more democratic form of cultural enrichment. The result would be a richer, more diverse cultural landscape, a city of soaring towers, challenging modern art, and inviting public spaces, all of which would have thrived if a few key men had not died at sea. The survival of Isidor and Ida Strauss would create the most immediate and visible ripples in the world of American retail. With Isidor at the helm for a decade or more, Macy's department store would consolidate its power in an unprecedented way. Isidor was a master of logistics, marketing, and customer experience. He likely would have pioneered new forms of retail, perhaps establishing mail-order catalogs to compete with Sears or a chain of smaller Macy's stores in developing suburban communities. Her famous motto, "Be everywhere, do everything, and never cease to amaze the customer," would be the driving force behind an empire. The American shopping experience, from the main street to the family living room, was shaped by his enduring vision. This retail dominance would have a knock-on effect on fashion and manufacturing. With Macy's setting the trends, empowered by its massive purchasing power, the styles seen on the streets of New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles would be more uniform, more Macy's approved. Isidor and his buyers would become arbiters of American taste. This could have accelerated the rise of ready-to-wear, making fashion more accessible but perhaps less diverse. The store's influence extended to housewares, furniture, and even literature, as Macy's book department could either elevate or sink an author. The cultural landscape would have a strong, central gatekeeper in the form of a single, massive department store. Art and finance would also dance to a different tune. Benjamin Guggenheim's constant presence in the financial world meant that more adventurous capital was available for speculative ventures. Perhaps she would have been the money behind the first major motion picture studios, seeing the commercial potential of the silver screen long before others. Imagine a Guggenheim Pictures that competes with Paramount and MGM, producing films that reflect its own bold, cosmopolitan tastes. This would change the context of early Hollywood, perhaps leading to more sophisticated, European interactive films during the silent era and beyond. The intersection of industrial prowess and artistic curiosity would create entirely new cultural products. The cumulative effect would be an America in which the lines between commerce, art, and high society became even more blurred. The Astors held galas in their skyscraper hotels, decorated with art collected by the Guggenheims and attended by people wearing clothes sold at Macy's. The concentration of cultural and economic power in the hands of a few interconnected families would create a new American aristocracy. This would be a time of incredible splendor and progress. But it would also stifle dissent and diversity. The story of America in the 20th century would not be the story of the masses, but rather, the story of these giants, who returned from the sea by a simple twist of fate. The Titanic's successful voyage was hailed as the ultimate triumph of modern technology. Newspapers would run headlines, "The Unsinkable Ship proves its courage," or maybe, "Titanic breaks the ice." The story would be simple and powerful. Humanity had conquered nature's most formidable forces through its ingenuity and engineering prowess. White Star Line launches a massive promotional campaign. She would display small scrapes on her torso as badges of honor. Instead of going down with his ship, Captain Smith retires as a world-class hero, celebrated in parades and honored by kings and presidents. He would be a living symbol of man's mastery over the elements. This event would reinforce a deep, almost religious belief in technology within society. This unwavering trust would profoundly influence public perception and behavior. The idea of a technological failure on such a massive scale would frankly seem absurd. People would board ocean liners with the same ease they boarded a train. The psychological impact would be enormous. The world would feel safer, more predictable, and under human control. This optimism would fuel a new wave of ambitious projects. Emboldened by the success of the Titanic, engineers and inventors would propose increasingly bold feats: transatlantic tunnels, floating cities, and airplanes of unimaginable size. The era's belief in progress, what was already powerful, would become an intoxicating dogma that left little room for doubt or caution. The psychological effects extended to the common man. The early 20th century was a time of rapid change, as new inventions, such as the telephone, the automobile, and electricity, transformed daily life. The Titanic's victory would serve as the ultimate proof that this was the right path. Any concern about the pace of change, she would be swept away by a wave of collective pride. This could lead to faster, perhaps more reckless, adoption of new technologies across all areas of life. There would be less questioning, less regulation, and a widespread belief that every problem, no matter how complex, could be solved with a big enough engine or a strong enough plate of steel. Of course, this boundless optimism would have a dark side. The Titanic's narrow escape is celebrated as a success, and the fundamental flaws in its design and safety procedures would be completely ignored. The fact that the ship only carries lifeboats for half of its passengers is forgotten. It would be a minor detail in the face of its triumphant arrival. The ship's dependence on speed, inadequate lookout procedures, and answers all would have been ignored if radio operators had focused on passenger messages rather than ice warnings. An attitude of complacency would settle over the entire maritime industry. The world would learn nothing because there were no lessons to be learned in this timeline. The ship had made it, and that was all that mattered. Because if the Titanic hadn't sunk, the world would have been deprived of one of its most painful, but, most necessary lessons in humility. In our timeline, the disaster was a brutal wake-up call. It forced the maritime world to question its own arrogance. Immediately afterwards, in 1914, the first International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, SOLAS, was signed. This convention required all ships to carry enough lifeboats for each person on board. 24-hour radio watches were established to ensure that calls for help were never missed again. The International Ice Patrol was created to monitor the North Atlantic shipping lanes. These were revolutionary changes, born from the ashes of the 1,500 victims of the Titanic. In a world where the Titanic had arrived safely, none of this would have happened. The Solace Convention would not have been convened, or even if it had been convened, it would have lacked any sense of urgency. Why create expensive, burdensome regulations for a problem that doesn't exist? Shipping companies would continue to prioritize profit and luxury over safety. Ships would continue to be built with inadequate lifeboats, based on the fallacious logic that they were the best lifeboats on their own, and would have time to transfer passengers to a rescue ship. The practice of keeping a 24-hour radio watch was considered an unnecessary expense. The North Atlantic would remain a dangerous, unregulated ocean area. The tragedy wasn't just about the lifeboats, it was a systemic failure. The investigation following the sinking revealed a series of errors. The ship was traveling too fast in an icy area, lookouts lacked binoculars, ice warnings were ignored, and the evacuation was chaotic. If there had been no disaster, there would have been no investigation. There would be no public outcry, no demand for accountability. White Star Line and other shipping companies would continue their risky practices, relying on their unsinkable technology. The stage would be set for another, future disaster. Sooner or later, another ship, perhaps more numerous than the Titanic, would have struck an iceberg or suffered some other disaster, and the loss of life would have been equally, if not greater, staggering. Absent this particular tragedy, humanity would have had to learn the lesson of technological arrogance the hard way, somewhere else. Perhaps later in the century there would be a devastating dam disaster, a massive airship explosion, or a chemical plant disaster. But the special, poignant lesson of the Titanic, that even man's most magnificent creation is vulnerable to nature, and that preparation is not a luxury but a necessity, would have been lost. The world would continue to sail in sweet ignorance toward an inevitable reckoning, all because one ship had escaped, rather than sink on one of those cold nights. The price of the Titanic's survival would have been paid with interest by the victims of a future preventable tragedy. The Titanic's successful passage would not have ended the great age of ocean liners. On the contrary, it would have accelerated it. The ship's fame would be immense, not because of tragedy, but because of its magnificence, size, and proven endurance. The White Star Line would immediately reap the rewards. Her sister ships, the Olympic and the soon-to-be-completed Britannic, would be the most sought-after ships in the Atlantic. White Star's main rival, Cunard, would have to respond. Racing would no longer be just about speed, with that coveted blue ribbon, but also about size and luxury. The supercruiser era would have truly begun a decade early. Imagine the headlines in the years following 1912. Cunard announces 100,000-ton Leviathan. Next, White Star will build a floating palace with a 2-story ballroom. The rivalry would be fierce, a matter of national pride for Britain and Germany, and a source of fascination for the world. These ships would become floating cities, technological marvels that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. They would have amenities we can barely imagine: multi-story theaters, indoor botanical gardens, even small electric railways to transport passengers from one end of the ship to the other. The focus would be to create a unique experience of grandeur, not completely isolated from the ocean outside. This race would bring with it incredible technological innovations. To power and propel these increasingly larger ships, engineers would have to develop more powerful turbine engines and more efficient propulsion systems. The immense scale of the projects advanced science in naval architecture and materials science. Steel production, electrical engineering, and interior design would advance with the demands of these floating giants. The ships themselves would become symbols of national industrial power, like the space race half a century later. Each new launch would be a global media event, a celebration of human progress and ambition. But this relentless pursuit of size and luxury, unfettered by tragedy, carried enormous risks. Because safety regulations remained lax, these superships would likely have been built with the same fatal flaws as the Titanic, only on a larger scale. They still carried too few lifeboats, relied on outdated radio procedures, and steamed at unsafe speeds in dangerous waters. The public, conditioned by the Titanic's victory, had complete confidence in them. The ultimate disaster, when it came, would be on a scale that would dwarf the original Titanic wreck, a horrific testament to the unchecked greed of an entire age. The Titanic's failure to sink and the subsequent boom in commercial shipbuilding was. It may have profoundly but quietly altered the course of World War I. The intense naval rivalry between Britain and Germany focused primarily on battleships, particularly dreadnought-class battleships. But the race for commercial supremacy in the Atlantic was a powerful symbol of national prestige and industrial prowess. A confident, thriving British merchant fleet, spearheaded by the Titanic and its even more magnificent successors. It would be a constant, visible reminder of British domination. This could have further fueled German ambitions, leading them to channel more resources into their own navy and merchant fleet to compete. On the other hand, the deep economic ties fostered by this vibrant transatlantic trade could have had a dampening effect on the rush to war. The industrial giants traveling on these ships, men like Astor and Guggenheim, they had extensive commercial interests throughout Europe. They were internationalists by nature, their fortunes dependent on stable, open global markets. These powerful men were in a position to listen to presidents and politicians, and they would likely lobby vigorously for peace and diplomacy. Their influence strengthened anti-war groups in America and England. It could potentially delay or even complicate the entry of these nations into the conflict. When the world's richest men fight for peace, the calculus of war changes. When war breaks out, as it likely will again, the nature of the conflict at sea would be different. The great superliners, symbols of peace and luxury, were immediately requisitioned for war service. Titanic, Britannic, and their fictional, even larger successors, they were converted into troop transport and hospital ships. However, since there is no SOLAS agreement, these ships would be carrying thousands of soldiers with the same inadequate security measures as passenger ships. A single torpedo from a German U-boat could not only sink a ship, it could destroy an entire division in minutes. The potential for a maritime disaster far exceeding the sinking of the Lusitania would have been frighteningly high. After the war, the global economic landscape would also look different. With American industrialists like Astor and Guggenheim enjoying another decade of uninterrupted growth, the economic power of the United States would be even more formidable. America emerged from the war not only as a major creditor, could emerge as the undisputed economic master of the world. This strengthened financial power, concentrated in the hands of men with a proven appetite for expansion, could have led to more aggressive American economic imperialism in the 1920s. The Roaring Twenties might have thundered even further with vast fortunes that never disappeared into the icy Atlantic. After all, a world where the Titanic had never sunk would be a world that had suffered no significant damage. Tragedies, despite all their pain, are also teachers. These are moments when humanity is forced to pause, think, and change. The sinking of the Titanic was a lesson written in ice and water. She taught us the limits of our technology, the dangers of pride, and the sacred importance of every human life. It was a story of heroism and cowardice, of class distinction, and shared humanity in the face of death. This powerful narrative has entered our collective consciousness, becoming a myth, a warning, and a source of empathy that has resonated for over a century. Without this tragedy, the early 20th century would have been a more arrogant, more confident, and ultimately more reckless place. The prevailing spirit would be one of unchecked optimism, a belief that progress is a straight, upward line. This world would be deprived of the moment of profound humility that sunset provides. It would have lost the shared sadness that binds people together across oceans and social classes. The names of Astor, Guggenheim, and Strauss would be known for their business success, but the touching story of Ida Strauss's refusal to leave her husband's side would be gone, replaced by a simple photograph of an elderly couple descending a pier. The cultural loss would be enormous. There would be no song, "Nearer My God to Thee," no lasting image of the orchestra playing on as the ship sinks. There would be no James Cameron movie, no Celine Dion song, no countless books, documentaries, and museum exhibitions exploring the human stories behind the disaster. In this alternate reality, the Titanic would be a historical footnote, a successful ship remembered only by maritime enthusiasts. It wouldn't be the powerful symbol it is today, a symbol of the end of a gilded age, a broken promise, and the fragility of human endeavor. The world would be less sad perhaps, but also less wise. After all, the ship's survival would have left humanity poorer. It would give us a few more skyscrapers, a more dominant storefront, and perhaps bolder artwork. But it would deprive us of a vital lesson in empathy. The story of the Titanic reminds us that we are all on the same ship, facing the same indifferent ocean. It forces us to think about how we would act in a crisis, what we truly value, and who we would save. By avoiding tragedy, the world would miss an opportunity to gaze into the abyss and learn something profound about itself. It would be a world with one grand story, few shared memories, and few reasons for humility in the face of the vast, cold universe.